Hello, everybody. This is Rob Warren, the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Marion, North Carolina. What you're about to hear is an excerpt from a night of stand-up comedy that we did at the church as a part of a fundraiser, and I invite you to listen. There are many changes that have happened in life since then, many more stories, and I'll probably upload those soon. But until then, please just sit back, listen, and enjoy.
Somebody asked me what the difference between stories that I can't tell in sermons and stories that I can tell in sermons is. And basically the stories that I'm going to share with you tonight are different because the stories that I share in sermons tend to have a redemptive quality. Someone in them is behaving in a way that's consistent with the Scripture. The stories you're going to hear tonight also have examples of people behaving in accordance with the Scripture, but it falls more on the thou shalt not side than the thou shalt side. This is the kind of thing that happens when you're a teenager. You tend to stack bad decisions on top of other bad decisions. One of the other things that we like to do, and we were just kind of known for doing, is we had kind of an attraction for road signs and advertising bulletins. We're driving out Norwood Road one day, going under the interstate overpass, and a safety barrel comes flying off the interstate, obviously hit by a truck. Didn't even really need to think about it. Just jerked the car on the side of the road, picked up the safety barrel, threw it in the back of the car, and took it home. Now, I have amazingly forgiving parents. But even I found it difficult to sleep in a room with a flashing orange light. So if you ever find yourself with a safety barrel, let me just tell you, they make wonderful Christmas wrappings. You just cut the bag out of it, stuff whatever you want to give to somebody in it, put it on their porch, they have to deal with it, and it's a gift that they'll remember for a long time. But we tended to pick these types of things up, salt and pepper shakers from hotels while we were swimming at their pools, even though we weren't guests. You know, things along that line. But there was one sign that I wanted desperately. There's a little town off 243 in Ohio, and it's a little town that has their name on a big green sign on 2 posts. And the name of that town is Getaway. And I thought, how great it would be to have a big green sign that has the word Getaway on it. And I drove by it for years while we had friends that lived out in that area, and friends of mine dated people in that area. And I dated a girl down in Cold Grove, which is the only place I've actually ever been thrown out of a church during a worship service. That's a story for another. Actually, that one I'll use in a sermon. But we just kept driving by this sign, and I just kept seeing it, Getaway, Getaway, and I had to have this sign. I described it to a friend as I wanted this sign with a white-hot intensity of 1,000 suns. I wanted this sign. And so one night, it's really quiet. We've driven that road time after time, never seen a trooper. We decided we were going to get this sign. So I backed the truck up, dropped the tailgate, hop up on the tailgate, open my toolbox, get my socket set out, because every truck should have a socket set, jumper cables, and render aid whenever possible. And I start cranking the sign loose. Now, I'm used to a certain amount of weirdness in my life. It's one of the reasons I guess ministry seemed like a good idea. When the lights came on, I wasn't really all that shocked. The blue blended with the green in a really interesting way. And the spotlight came on and just lit up the sign. And I learned something very early in life, and that is, if you look like you know what you're doing, you can get away with a lot. A friend of mine and I took a tree from a mall parking lot one day in broad daylight, planted it in his mom's yard, and you can still see it as you drive down the interstate between Milton and Charleston, West Virginia. Nobody asked us a question. One day when I was at Marshall, we took all the downspouts off the building and left them in a nice little stack. Nobody ever asked us a question. This night does not fit into that category because we didn't look like we knew what we were doing. We looked like we knew what we were doing was illegal. So I'm standing there with my ratchet up against the sign. The lights come on. I'm kind of blinded for a second. And I'm with another friend of mine. And he doesn't handle this kind of situation all that well. He's not used to it. And we were driving down the road in his car one night, and about 4 cruisers came out of nowhere, and the officers pulled their weapons. And we got to be involved with what's called a felony stop, because we matched the description of armed robbers that had been hitting banks in the area. And as we're walking backwards to the police, towards the officers with their weapons drawn, with our hands on the back of the head, he's already crying. And I just looked at him and said, "That's it, I'm cutting off all my hair tomorrow." And I did. But I'm standing there with this sign, and he's down by the tailgate, and I know he's really not going to be any help in this situation. And I hear the officer say, "What the hell do you boys think you're doing?" And I just clicked the back of the ratchet and started spinning it the other way and said, "Oh, nothing, officer. We just noticed the sign was loose and thought we'd stop by and tighten it up." Now, when you tell a lie like this, you have to leave the pause there. The person hearing the lie has 3 choices. The first is to believe it, which nobody in their right minds is going to believe that. The second is to call you a liar and punish you for it. But the third, and I think this is what a lot of policemen and a lot of parents and a lot of car buyers fall into, is they know you've just lied to them, but you gave them a laugh and a little bit of a show, so they're going to let it slide. And the minute I heard him laugh, I thought, okay, this is the area we're in now. And I told my friend, "Shut up." I finished tightening up the sign, took my socket out, wiped it off on my shirt, put it back in my case, dropped it in the toolbox, sat down on the tailgate. The police officer came up to us and explained that he had my license number, and that if that sign ever disappears, he's going to start looking for it at my house. I explained to him that my collecting road signs days were over at that point, and if that sign ever disappears, I will have had nothing to do with it. And it dawned on me that since we're recording this and sending it to my friends back home, that sign's going to disappear within the next 2 weeks.